Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon is a podcast on directing for anybody that's quite simply ever watched anything. Pete converses with a wide range of fellow directors, writers, actors, showrunners, producers, executives, and more on a journey to determine just what makes a good director and why we'll always need stories. Visit www.petechatmon.com to get your official director's chair wear, hoodies, hats, jackets, mugs, and other swag, and learn more about your host.
All right. Yo, it has been a long time. Welcome to episode 40 of Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon. The last episode that you've gotten from us was episode 39, obviously, but the date of that episode was July 8th, 2022. That episode was a crossover with the Just Shoot It pod called Directing Great Television, and wanted to share what I had to share with the folks over there. But yeah, it's been a minute since I've been over here and sat down in this chair. And this is going to be one of those 0 to 100 catch-ups, let you know everything that's been going on and set you up for what we have coming your way this season. Now, what is a season of Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon? That's been the question. I've still been trying to figure that out. You know, initially it was going to be 20 episodes, but then look, y'all, I recognized that that was too much work and I'd have an incomplete season for too long of a stretch. And so then I thought, well, maybe 10 episodes will do it. And then I thought maybe no episodes and we'll just go forever, kind of like Mark Maron's WTF podcast where, you know, they're on episode 3,000, you know, and they just kind of go and he just keeps hitting you with the great content. So I thought maybe we would do that, or kind of like a script notes deal. And I guess the tail has been wagging the dog on this whole deal, because when I update the IMDb page for the show, there's a field that will ask you to specify what season of the show you are submitting. And so I wanted to be all organized, and that's how I ended up with this idea of a season. And I had this whole conundrum about how many episodes that would be. So anyway, that remains an unquestioned or an unanswered question. Let's flip that around. But what I can guarantee is that we'll probably take some hiatus time here and there, like we just did. And then I'll be back with a flurry of episodes as we're about to do now. And I'll be bringing back to you, our listeners, on all the podcast platforms and our viewers on YouTube. I do recommend y'all check it out on YouTube. It's cool to watch the interactions, I think. And I personally prefer that. But, you know, when you're not in the car, or when you're in the car, you're not watching YouTube. So I get it. That's why we hit you with both. But I'll be bringing back to you the things that I learned in those hiatus moments. So I'll have new relationships. I'll have new guests to offer new perspectives on this industry we love so much. So that's the word, y'all. Now, what's the catch up? What have I been up to? Reasonable Doubt season 1 wrapped back in May. I think it was May 24th. And that wrapped with me directing episode 9, which was the finale. And I was really proud of what we did on that show, on that episode, tying up all the storylines and really, you know, trying to put a stamp on the look of what the show would be in that episode, working with my man, Rob Arnold, on the visuals as the DP. And, you know, just shout out to all involved on that. Obviously, the creator, Rama Muhammad, the EPs, Kerry Washington, Rama, of course, as well, Larry Wilmore, Pilar Savoni, EPs, Tamara Gregory, and then just everybody behind the show. Emiatsi Cornaldi. The show would not be possible without it resting on her talented back, and the amazing cast up and down the board. So that's one thing that I was up to in the past 8 months. I think I've got a list of 11 things. So I'm gonna just run down what they are. What else? We took our daughter to hang with the grandparents in Wisconsin and Virginia, I think immediately after we wrapped. I'm talking about like maybe the next day, because let me tell you, when you work in television, but also when you work on a show in the producing director capacity or in any capacity where you're there every day, you really get excited about going somewhere else just to kind of, get a little bit of a vacation from the creative monotony that we work for and that we want, but you do want to get a little break from that. So we were off to take the baby to meet the grandparents. That was number 2. What's number 3? Number 3 is then we took the baby to British Virgin Islands. I am not working for the tourism board there, but I highly recommend it. If you're like a beach person and you like the water and you like blue ass water and waves and serenity and all that, you honestly can't beat it. So that was number 3. Number 4, then we went from there to New York to see our New York peoples, because it was the baby world tour. People needed to meet this beautiful baby. Then, of course, en route to that, we caught the beautiful COVID. We had dodged it for so long, but ironically, the day before we were flying back, the CDC took the mandate away for tests on flights, international flights. And so we caught it literally on the first flight available. So that was number 4. Number 5, now we get back to the work. I came back to LA and directed the season 1 finale of Unprisoned, starring Kerry Washington and Delroy Lindo. So another Simpson Street project kept in the family, and had an amazing time on that show. Went from a 1-hour drama on A Reasonable Doubt to a half-hour. It's not a dramedy. It's like dramatic comedy. It's hard to put into a genre that really encompasses the levels of tone that were balanced in Unprisoned. But went from a 1 hour to a half hour. Directed that finale. That was number 5. Number 6, then we took in to go to St. Bart's for a friend's 40th birthday celebration and hang. That was pretty dope too. I'm realizing that this sounds pretty crazy. 7 years ago, I would not think that my summer would have consisted with such beautiful travel, but here we are, and I'm thankful and blessed that we're able to do it. Number 7, I returned to LA and I directed, and now we get to the work. In the summer, that was a summer flow. I returned to LA. This would be August of 22. And then I directed the 2nd episode of Grey's Anatomy, episode 1902. For those unfamiliar with the code, 1902 means that it's season 19, episode 2. So I directed that. Really fun introduction of new characters, 5 new interns, and new life, new blood into the show. So that was really fun to kind of have some involvement in the introduction of those folks. Then I directed, I guess that went into September. So in October, I directed episode 107 of Fatal Attraction, starring Joshua Jackson, Lizzie Kaplan, Amanda Peet. And so that was awesome. It was that show premieres April 30th. I think my episode will release on June 11th or so. I'm amazed that I remember these dates. I carve them into my memory when I see them on IMDb. But that was a really fun show. I got to do somewhat of a bottle episode that really goes into the Alex character played by Glenn Close in the film, now played by the amazing Lizzie Kaplan in the series. And we go back and kind of follow her story in a very interesting way. So shout out to Silver Tree, the producing director who brought me on to Fatal Attraction from Flight Attendant. And before that, she's amazing. And I'm really thankful to continue to work with her. Then number 9 of these 11 things I've been up to, I directed episode 206 of Minx, which used to be an HBO Max show, but now is a Starz show and no release date yet. HBO Max reversed the renewal on the show. That has been a bit of a thing that's happened across a lot of networks. But, I've had a couple HBO Max shows for which that has happened. And, that's kind of the nature of this shift in the landscape as these companies are trying to figure out how they're going to handle their economics. But had an amazing time on Minx, working with the creator and showrunner, Ellen Rappaport, obviously the amazing cast. So many folks that I think are awesome at what they do and kind of can handle not only the period aspect, but the drama and the comedy. And I think we did a really awesome episode. So check out episode 6 of Minx, the 10th of 11 things that I did. Minx wrapped in November, and then in December I directed. I don't know the episode number yet because I think there was a script number as far as like where it was in the sequence of the scripts that were written, but as far as when it will be released in the chronology of the season, I think it differs. So it's a season 2 episode of American Auto, which is on NBC, starring Anna Gasteyer. And that was super fun to kind of stay in the comedy box a bit between Minx and American Auto and really just play with the joke, because it's the type of show where the camera is more of an observer and you're not necessarily putting a whole lot of sauce on the camera moves or anything like that. You really have to think about the blocking and how that can add to the joke and enhance the comedic factor that you're trying to play in a particular scene. And it was really fun to kind of play in that sandbox, because all of these different tools really do reveal themselves as being necessary at different moments in any kind of show. So that's why I'm a big fan of the career that I've been very fortunate to have, working in both genres and across, all kinds of platforms. Now, lastly, the 11th thing that I've been up to of 11 things since we've brought you an episode back in July of 2022, I directed the season 1 finale of Dead Boy Detectives in Vancouver. That also began as an HBO Max show. It will now be moving to Netflix. And that was just a really awesome experience. First time doing, blowing up buildings and doing wire pull stunts and a great deal of green screen at kind of like the highest level. And, so many different demands. I'm actually going to do an episode with a VFX supervisor so we can talk more in depth about what that process is like and what the demands are for the director that are different from, a standard kind of sitcom or drama that may have a more traditional stunt here or there, but not really the demands of explosions and green screen and et cetera. So we'll get into that. But yeah, really happy to have directed that finale. Glenn Winter, the producing director, was an amazing collaborator on the show, getting me up to speed on all the rules of the world. And it was also a nice reuniting with Steve Yockey, the showrunner, co-showrunner on The Flight Attendant, as well as Beth Schwartzman, who was the co-showrunner on Dead Boy Detective. So those are the 11 things that I've been up to, and coupled with, now a 17-month-old baby who's beautiful and running around and saying words and, keeping us very happily busy. It was impossible to, unless people wanted to do midnight interviews, which no one seemed to want to do, to keep the content coming. But it's back. So what's up next? This is a mailbag episode. So I have a few questions that we're going to get to, and then I'll tell you what the rest of the season does look like. But what's up next for me as a director? Let's see. In April, I'm going to direct an episode of Interior Chinatown, a great book, a New York Times bestseller. Taika Waititi's doing the pilot. Charlie Yu is the writer of the book and showrunner of the series. And I'm excited to direct that. I'll be working with Mike Berlucci again, DP from Mythic Quest. He also shot Our Flag Means Death and You're the Worst, and he was a guest on the podcast. So you could listen back to the Mike Berlucci episode. After that, I have a couple of the shows that we're working on some scheduling, so you'll get more specific updates from me in the coming weeks. And then, of course, I've got a screenplay to finish. This thing's been hanging over our head. Candace McFarlane and I are co-writing it, and the reality of us both working, she's writing on a show in New York, has made completing that script a little more challenging than I like, but we're getting there. And I hope to get back into the feature space as a director. And then obviously seeking more pilot opportunities and producing director opportunities. And finally, an interview on this podcast with my wife, actress and producer, Kelly McCreary. So that'll be coming up for y'all. Should I say this season? I don't know, but it'll be coming up in the flurry of episodes to come your way. But now let's get to our submitted questions and deal with this mailbag, baby.
This is Keith Powell. I'm a writer, director, and actor, and you're listening to Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon.
Transitions, a director's journey and motivational handbook, is Pete Chatmon's book from Michael Weasley Productions. What started in 1993 has been a marathon of persistence and creative pivots, transitioning from indie filmmaker to teaching at NYU's acclaimed film school, to running a production company, to directing television and commercials, and ultimately eyeing a return to the feature films that gave him his start. A mixture of how-to, self-help, and inspiration. This book is for any person targeting a successful career in the creative arts. Transitions, a director's journey and motivational handbook from Michael Weasley Productions, is available on Amazon and anywhere else you get your books. Don't forget about your local mom and pop shops, people.
Now, I do want to encourage people to submit their questions to us via Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon at gmail.com or via the Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon Instagram page or on the YouTube page, or it's like, or. You can also look out for periodic stories from me on my IG page at Pete Chatmon. And again, that's PETECHATMON, where I will ask for questions. And in fact, that is where I got today's questions from. So our first question comes from the talented filmmaker and good friend of mine at I_am_idle. IDIL. How do you select what or what not to work on? Great question. I ask myself that every month, but I will say that in the beginning, I think you work on anything that you can work on so you can establish yourself in this world, in this game, in this industry, with the credit that you're trying to have in the forefront as what you do. So like if you're trying to be a director and you've been known as a writer, like you really can't be too picky in trying to get the director credits, particularly the first ones, to begin to build up some momentum. I do think it's important to have a clear vision for where you're going and to let the right people know it. So it's not about necessarily taking anything that comes your way. You will be telling people things about yourself and you'll be pitching for particular shows. And then a show that you weren't necessarily dying to do perhaps reveals itself and obviously you take it. And, when I say having a clear vision for yourself, if you've read my book, Transitions, or listened to this podcast enough, I always say that my expressed goal in all meetings was to anyone on the other side of the table, couch, whatever it might have been, I'm looking to do half-hour single camera comedies. I wasn't saying I want to do 1-hour dramas. I was not saying I want to do multicam. I want to do half-hour single camera comedies. Now, if there was ever an opportunity to sprinkle in the fact that I love dramas, or they had a drama that I loved and I'd love to, perhaps, go in that direction at some point, then I might let that person know because it has a particular value. But I would not overburden folks with that information if it was not going to be conducive toward getting a job. But streamlining this, and kind of continuing the answer, I think after taking all work that you can get in the beginning and after letting people know where you want to go, I think there's a point at which you begin to have a sense of, oh, okay, now I'm working. It seems like I don't have to be as nervous about whether or not I'll be hired again as I was in the beginning. For me personally, that was about 3 years in, where it was like, okay, it seems like, it's happening. And, I'm doing somewhere between 8 and 14 episodes a year. And it's staying in that range. Actually, and then in the third year, it's maybe getting between 12 and 14. So it feels like I've got a little space carved out for myself. And now is the time that I'm going to get more specific about what I want to do. And I'm going to maybe share my larger goals that I kept a little bit more to myself because I wanted to have a clear target and have other people have a clear target to where I was going to go. At that point, I would get more selective. And at that point, for me, around 3 years, I did get more selective. And I was going after shows that I liked specifically. I'd watch a show and reach out to my reps and say, you know, I'd love to see if we can have a meeting on this particular show. And that proved to be very fruitful. But, you know, I think this question is always there, no matter what stage of your career you're in. And the important thing is to have the proper context. There's a reason to do or not to do any show that's not just about your taste. Often it could be relationships. Often it could be, you know, you want to build out a resume that shows you can handle stunts now, you know, or shows you can handle comedy or whatever it might be. And I think like you've really got to be on top of the target for yourself so you can make these choices with precision. So that would be my answer at I Am It'll about how do you select what or what not to work on. Now, our second comes from Anonymous, and they weren't anonymous to me, but they desired to be anonymous. And they asked me, how do you maximize your relationship with your reps? I have one word first. I think specificity. What is it that you want to do? Where do you want to go? And being clear about that, because that specificity breeds accountability. I do a yearly document that wraps up what has happened in the last year, or, you know, now that I've kind of been doing this longer, here's where we are, you know, over, you know, all the years starting from 2017. And then more importantly, here are the goals for 2023. I have examples of these documents in my book. So I advise you to, you know, pick that up and look at it. But that is very helpful for me in understanding how I want to spend my focus and my time. And then it's also helpful if, you know, this is the worst case scenario, you know, if you're being specific and you're sharing these goals, and then, you know, here you are 2 years later and none of the things that you put on your goals have happened and the needle hasn't moved in any way, you know, perhaps you might need to consider finding new people to work with or readdressing that working relationship with your reps because these things aren't happening. Another thing I think that's important in maximizing your relationship with your reps is to not be afraid to ask questions. I mean, that goes for this job across the board. You're a director, yet you do have to sometimes say, I do not know how to accomplish this. So how do we do it? And it seems like a little bit of an oxymoron. But anyway, you have to not be afraid to ask questions. I think you need to educate yourself on what their job is. You are going to have a different conversation with your manager than you would have with your agent, than you would have with your lawyer. And when you do get to the place where you're going to have, you know, conference calls as you're trying to figure out, you know, what to do with a particular offer or, you know, what meetings to take or whatever, educating yourself on what their job is helps you understand where they're coming from. And I think the final piece of that, not being afraid to ask questions and educating yourself on what their job is that ask how you can best enable them to meet the goals that you desire. So do you need a reel from me? Is my website good? You know what I mean? Like, what do I need to do in the room that would be more beneficial to me and to us, because we all get paid when things work out well for me, you know, because maybe I'm not handling meetings well. Like, is there anything that you can tell me that I need, that I can take advantage of? So what I now know as your job and your focus, you have all of the ammunition and all the tools to accomplish it. And I think that's it. That's how I view it. And I think also it's not static. That will change, right? Everything I've just mentioned, it changes year to year, you know, but also like if you now, like when you now have a different goal, you may now need to see if they have everything they need from you to get you to that new position. So don't get static and remain lively and focused and nimble and curious. And I think that's how you maximize your relationship with your reps. Question number 3 is from @Olivia Troy, whom I've worked with on Love Life. She's amazing. She is an intimacy coordinator. And her question is, what are your thoughts on working with intimacy coordinators? How does the collaboration work best/fail for you? So first off, and this is no lip service, I love working with intimacy coordinators. I think it can take some of the awkwardness away from negotiating what will be accomplished on camera. Intimate scenes are very mechanical, even though they might look lustful and sexy in an edited episode or film. But, it's a very mechanical thing on the day. And there's a power dynamic that's inherent to the situation. And that power dynamic is, I'm the director in the old days, right? I'm the director, how about you do this? And, for an actor, thinking that if they say no and speak up for themselves and advocate for themselves and use the agency that they should have for themselves, they might think, well, if the director wants that and I don't do it, am I putting myself in a bad position for future work or whatever it may be? So having the intimacy coordinator helps to remove that awkwardness. And also, I guess I should talk for a second, on how that works, right? So when you work with an intimacy coordinator, they get the script, they look at anything that is going to be people having a physical closeness. When I mark my script up, I mark it up whether it's sexual or not. It could be a hug. It could be I just want to have, I want there to be a conversation with the talent about anything that has someone in their space, because you just don't know what people bring, the experience in life that people bring to those moments. And so you want to be respectful of anything could be triggering. So the intimacy coordinator looks at every scene. They have an initial conversation with you as a director, and you talk about how you view all of these moments happening. How many beats is that kiss? It holds for 2 seconds. Will any breasts be shown? No, it won't. We'll be suggesting complete nudity, but we won't be showing it on camera. So then that lets them know that there can be a modesty garment on the actor to cover them up. So this all, trickles down into every scene, and it becomes very specific. And they're going to be asking me what my shots are at some point. But in the beginning, it's really just about how do you envision this and what do you expect or desire? And I think that's better. I think, what do you desire from the actor? Because it's not necessarily you gonna do this. And that's what I think bringing the intimacy coordinator into the mix has birthed back into these conversations, right? So that's what they do. And then when you get on set, they are there to kind of make sure everything stays on track. And what's been agreed to is clear. People, if it's a closed set, which it oftentimes is, that means they're making sure, no one's in Video Village that shouldn't be. Other monitors are covered or turned off, or only people who should be seeing them, like hair and makeup perhaps, are looking at it. And they're just making sure that the set is respectful of all the things that have been agreed upon, but also that should happen and should have always been happening when people are exposing themselves in such an intimate way. And so I think it's, this director intimacy coordinator collaboration is an evolving thing. And, with each job that I do, I'm refining how to best communicate with all parties. I've had an interesting stretch of doing a lot of intimacy work. Perhaps, I don't know, I'm trying to think if this is accurate. I was going to say, perhaps most so on You Season 3, Episode 8, A Swing and a Miss, which is Joe and Love have a swingers night and everything goes wrong, but it's super intimate with 4 people, actually 5, because then there's someone else that Joe's infatuated with. And then it turns into a stunt scene with arrows and grappling and stabbing and dunking in a sink. And so, impossible to accomplish that and navigate all the intricacies and subtleties without, this collaborative group. Now, let's see. So I think it works best really as designed and as I've outlined how it kind of unfolds for you on set as a director. The only challenge, at least in my experience, comes from when the intimacy coordinator perhaps begins to overstep and get prematurely involved in the problem solving that occurs on set. Now, ideally, you prep and talk everything out. Like I said, they take your conversation about what you desire back to the actor, and then they bring back everything that the actor says. So usually a confirmation of XYZ, or, maybe a little tweak, like they like this, but, they would prefer not to do that. And so you're like, okay, great. Now everybody gets to set with a clear picture of what's going to happen. But you can be on set and things can evolve. That's what happens on every aspect of a production, whether it's a stunt or a written joke or whatever it might be, or an intimacy scene. So, that challenge of having an intimacy coordinator get involved prematurely kind of is the thing that can rankle me, because I think often there's a bit of complicated math to keep a scene shootable while also honoring the parameters that have been established during the conversations that I've mentioned. And personally, I like to lead the problem solving while honoring what we've all agreed to, knowing that it'll be, in the spirit of the scene. So it's the rare occasion, but when an intimacy coordinator starts saying, well, the actor could do this, or what about that, before I've had my respectful conversation outside of new intimacy movements, it can begin to be disruptive to the process. So, that's just one thing. But of course, if we veer into anything that feels remotely like a pivot from what was discussed in prep, then I'm handing the keys, the vehicle, the entire thing right back to the intimacy coordinator to make sure that everyone is comfortable on all sides of whatever specific action we may be talking about. And so, an actor might suggest oh, well, I could just do this, or the other actor could just do that. And it's like, well, the intimacy coordinator is there to make sure the other actor's cool with that. That other actor might not be cool with you doing, having them touch you there, even though you're okay with it. Kind of interestingly, right now, I love to see it, Penn Badgley for season 4 of You requested less intimate moments because of, his concern for fidelity in his marriage. And I think that's super respectful. It's probably not what people are expecting to hear, but Sarah Gamble, the showrunner, worked with him to find a place where everyone would be happy. And I think the show, which I think part 2 of season 4 has dropped, so I will be watching that, is still awesome. And there's a great spirit about what I'm sure they accomplished on set. So those are my thoughts on working with intimacy coordinators. So thank you, Olivia Troy. And I look forward to working with you again. We worked on Love Life, y'all. So Love Life season 2, if you want to see and maybe kind of dissect what I'm talking about or imagine what it's like even more, take a look at episode 202 when Marcus goes home with Paloma, an NYU student, and they have an interesting night. So question number 4. This is from @takethegood_. Have you worked with someone with mental illness? How did you support? That is an interesting question. And I think my answer would be that I have not knowingly. There have definitely been times where maybe it's been rumored that someone's behavior is connected to a certain condition, but it's not something where I've personally been given a heads up. And, I'm not actually sure with privacy and medical rights that I'd necessarily be informed about something like that. That's just my hunch. I feel like one of the few ways you would know is if there's an actor that's publicly dealing with something, whether it was released by them or leaked by someone. And so now people kind of have that awareness of it. But what I can say is that I try and work from a place where I am considerate of the demands we each face in the world, and that any behavioral manifestations that may come my way are almost never personal. And so that allows me to give some grace and find some way to navigate whatever moments might be challenging for whatever reasons in a delicate and result-oriented way. Because at the end of the day, no matter what's happening, we've got to find a way to shoot the scene. And we also have to find a way to be respectful. And so I think that, we all walk around with our own luggage of sorts, and it's just about finding a way to collaborate peacefully. I've definitely had challenges, with certain folks. I will not lie. I will not name. And sometimes it's been kind of inexplicable. But at the end of the day, I think it's everything that I've mentioned. It's like, all right, well, how is there any way that I can even be helpful? Can I help identify what the challenge may be in this moment and remove that challenge? I think sometimes, and maybe this is the specific question, like maybe the challenge can't be removed, but I think that what I'm happy to see on many sets now is that there's just much more of an awareness of the different things that people bring to the table, all of those things being acceptable, all of those things being able to be supported. And I think, that is something that excites me about the future as more and more voices are welcomed on sets and find their way to have their visions relayed to screen. So that is it, y'all. That is episode 40, 0 to 100, the catch-up mailbag. I really do love answering your questions, so keep shooting them my way. We'll be back with episode 41, which will be one of two things. I'm not quite sure I want to tell you yet, but I won't tell you yet. Here's what I will tell you, though. Here's what's lining up for this season or flurry of episodes. We're going to have my man, Jeff Bird, who is the producing director on Showtime's Yellow Jackets. We're going to have Shannon Baker Davis, currently editing a Marvel project, but also my first ever editor on episodic for Grownish. She's had quite the career since 2017. We will have Valerie Weiss, another director and friend. She's very involved with Going Paperless and Scriptation, but also an accomplished director of TV and film, including that Netflix movie Mixtape. And she directed an episode of Star Trek Strange New Worlds. That'll be coming soon. We'll also have Ellen Rappaport, the creator, showrunner of Minx, Shiri Appleby, actor and director, and a bunch of other folks that I'm really excited to bring to y'all. So as you know, as we always do, I look forward to seeing what you guys are creating, and I'll take it out with stay safe, spread love, and of course, keep creating. What's up, people? This is Pete Chatmon. Follow me on Instagram and on Twitter via @PeteChatmon. Follow the pod on Facebook on our Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon official page, and hit up our mailbag with questions, suggestions, or hey, donations if you're feeling like it, via Let's Shoot with Pete Chatmon @gmail.com. And just in case you need to know how to spell it, that's Pete with the last name ChatMon.